Good afternoon. That sounds like 5 people in here. Good afternoon. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Welcome to today's lecture. It is an honor for me to introduce Adriana Marais. Adriana is coming to us from the UK ZN Center for Quantum Technology. Outside of doing her research there, she has actually stacked up a number of accolades for herself, including a number of presentations and research published. She's also the recipient of the 2014 Male Guardian 200 Young South Africans Award, as well as the L'Oreal UNESCO International Rising Talent Grant for Women in Science. Not to mention, she is also a candidate chosen for the Mars One project that will see humans move to Mars in 2024. How awesome is that? Like, she could be going to Mars. That's pretty cool, right? So today, I also just learned that she just recently has conferred her PhD, so she is now Dr. Adriana. So give her a round of applause real quick. So today, Adriana will be discussing her work in photosynthesis, discussing whether or not birds use quantum mechanics to migrate, and also tell us how quantum mechanics may contribute to the understanding of biology in general. With that, go ahead, Adriana.
Thanks so much, Janita. Thanks to all the organizers of Scifest this year, and thanks to all of you for being here. So, my research is in the field of quantum biology. You might be wondering, what is quantum? A bit more about what is biology, but I'm sure biology is one of your subjects at school, but maybe quantum is something. So today I'm probably going to raise more questions in your mind than I'm going to give answers, but that's what science is all about. Science is about asking questions. Science is not about being boring and wearing a white lab coat and staying inside all day long in the lab. No. Science is about asking questions about the world that we live in. Who's ever had a question about the world we live in? Everyone, okay? Everybody wonders why things are the way they are. Everybody looks around. That's humans. That's what we do. We ask questions. As a researcher, we do research. Now, research is one of the most amazing careers that I can imagine, because I spend my time trying to answer those questions that I have. That's my job. How lucky am I to do that, okay? And you can do it too. So if you've ever had questions about why things are the way they are, you should pursue these questions. And if you are interested in following a career in research, that's what you will spend your day doing. So today I will be telling you about some of the questions that we have raised, some of the questions. So I will tell you a bit about quantum mechanics, I'll tell you a bit about biology, I'll discuss a little bit about our understanding of life, but basically a common theme through everything that I will tell you is to do with light and life. So I'm sure you all know what light and life is, at least that's a simple thing to begin with. So I will be talking about photosynthesis, which, as you know, is the process by which plants, algae, bacteria take sunlight as energy and transfer it into other things that they use to live. So light is a common theme running through here. Also, light is an important tool in science. Just as we use light to see with our eyes, in the laboratory we use light to look at things, big things, but also very, very, very small things. We use lasers, we use ultra-fast spectroscopy to see things that happen on very small scales and in very, very, very short times, like 1/1,000,000th of a second or even less. So we are not able to see these things. Can you watch something that happens in 1/1,000,000th of a second? No, okay? Even a very fast, fancy camera cannot see something that happens in 1/1,000,000th of a second. So I will be explaining to you now what we are able to do in the laboratory a little bit with respect to investigating photosynthesis and some very amazing things that happen in photosynthetic systems on very small length scales and in very short times. So let's begin. Oh dear, it's a bit small. I hope you can read from the back. No, I'm joking. That's a joke. That is not what I'm going to do today. Okay. On the left, we do indeed have some of the equations that we use in quantum theory. So if you want to study science, of course, it takes a lot of hard work. But today, I'm not here to bore you. I'm here to inspire you. So let's move away from this. This picture on the left is indeed what people measure in the laboratory in biology. Okay, but we're not going to talk too much about that. I would just like to explain some of the, well, maybe you're wondering, things have to do with biology. Let's see. Okay, so quantum mechanics. Who's heard of quantum mechanics? Okay, quantum mechanics deals with the very, very small parts of the world that we see around us. Things like electrons. You've heard of electrons, right? Electrons make up current. So electrons are very small. We can't see them with the naked eye. Over here is a picture of the hydrogen atom. So using light, as I've said, using lasers, scientists are able to make pictures of the hydrogen atom. So, you know, the hydrogen atom has the proton in the middle and the electron going around the proton. So over here, there's two different frequencies of laser light that are shone on the hydrogen atom. And the red part shows that the electron has a high probability of being near the center, close to the proton. And as the colors change, there's less probability for the electron to be there as you move out. Okay, so that's a picture, like a scientist's picture of what it looks like, because also it's much too small for us to see with our eye. So lasers have helped us to make that picture. Biology deals with things that we've seen, okay? Biology you probably understand better. Things like elephants, things like trees, but also small things like bacteria. So it may be a new thing to you to hear that such small things like electrons and atoms and molecules play an important role in our understanding of how photosynthesis, and indeed other parts of biology, as I'll explain later, how these two things are related. So, as I've said, science is all about asking questions and trying to find answers to these questions. So, some of the questions I will discuss today is, what is quantum mechanics? What is life? What is quantum biology? And how does light help us to understand life? It is the International Year of Light this year, by the way. So, it's nice for us to focus on how light helps us to do science. Finally, in case you didn't catch the why this should be interesting to us as humans living on this planet. So, what is quantum mechanics? Well, I've spent more than 10 years studying quantum mechanics, and it will be difficult, obviously, for me to explain all of this in the half an hour that I have here, so I will just give you some very basic points now. But you should feel free, if you're interested, to look on the internet, to look at books, to ask your science teachers more about it, about these questions that I will raise. So basically, when we are talking in research about science or about physics in particular, so I'm a physicist, actually, I study physics. I don't do the experiments, I'm a theorist, okay? But basically, people distinguish between two types of physics. One we call classical physics. Who's heard of Newton's laws? Good, okay, we all learn Newton's laws at school. That's classical physics, okay? That's like when you throw a ball, how long does it travel for, how far does it go? That's what we call classical physics. Have to be quite big, like centimeters or millimeters. Okay, there's a sugar cube, you all know how much a centimeter is. There's some sand, that's like granules on millimeter sizes. This is all still classical. Then, at some point, the physics changes. Okay, let me skip the middle, but now I'll go straight to the end. Over here we see quantum dots. These things are very small, 10 to the minus 10 meters. So who's heard of nanotechnology? If you've heard the word nano, that means 10 to the minus 9. That means 0.090 zeros, and then a 1. That's 1 nanometer. Okay, quantum is even smaller than that. It can also be nano. But when you get beyond the nanometer scale, then you're really looking at single electrons, single atoms. That's where quantum mechanics describes these things accurately. So quantum mechanics leads to your cell phones working. Quantum mechanics has led to the laser, which helps CDs play. Okay, I'm just trying to tell you that quantum mechanics is not this weird thing that's laboratory only. It's something that has influenced our daily life through the kinds of technologies that have emerged from it. Okay, so the middle area where we're talking about, who knows what this middle measurement is here? Micrometers, good, that mu is the Greek symbol for micro. And we can guess what this is. It's hair. Maybe you've seen something like that before. So one strand of human hair is on a scale of micrometers. So that's just to show you about that size. Then we get down to nanometers. You can recognize the structure here. DNA, good. So DNA is on the size of nano. And the work that we do is in between these two basically, but even smaller than nano. Okay, that's where quantum physics describes reality very well. So, quantum theory is, some people think it's weird, some people think it's crazy. It's certainly counterintuitive, so it's kind of different to the way that we see the world. Quantum objects have a wave. So you know that light can behave as a wave. Maybe you've learned that in science already. Okay. But this wave-like nature leads to some properties which we don't see in our everyday life. Okay, one of these properties is the ability to be in two places at once. Good, maybe some of you have heard of this. Okay, there's a word that I will use from now on to talk about being in two places at once. Quantum coherence. Yeah, that's the only word I'm going to ask you to remember, basically. So, quantum coherence is something that only happens in the quantum world on very small scales. It has to do with being in two places at once. This is something that electrons can do. This is something that photons can do. This is something that very small things can do, which big objects cannot. Okay, sometimes we wish we could be in two places at once, but so far it seems as though we can't. So maybe you can understand the joke now that big classical objects like this guy skiing down the hill, it's not possible for him to be in the left of the tree and the right of the tree. This is not something that humans can do, but it is something that very small things can do, and that's a good difference between classical and quantum. So this might be seen as a paradox. How can electrons be in two places at once, but we can't? But as Richard Feynman, who won the Nobel Prize in physics, said, the paradox is just a conflict between reality and your feeling of what reality should be. So maybe we feel that reality should be like things can only be in one place at once. But when we do science, we realize that for very small things, this is just not true. So we need to update our understanding of reality. Okay, so that's all I'm going to say about quantum mechanics, if you thought that was interesting. It's a fascinating field of all sorts of weird and amazing discoveries to be made, so please look up more in your books or on the internet. There's so many YouTube videos explaining very complicated things in a very simple way. So use your resources at your schools wisely, and you can look up on that more. So now I'm going to switch to biology. The research is quantum biology, that's the quantum. Let's now go to the biology. So, according to the fossil record, well, the first fossils are about 3.5 billion years ago, but there is some evidence that life emerged even before that, about 3.8 billion years ago. 3.85, the big G stands for billion. So, these were in the form of bacteria, okay? Not like big animals walking around, but very simple, small living systems in the form of bacteria. And this is an artist's impression of what these things could have looked like in the very early stages of Earth, nearly 4 billion years ago. Okay, but basically what I wanted to say next is even though life has been around for a very long time, of what life is, it's still somewhat of a mystery, okay? We have lots of examples of life on Earth. We are one of them, okay? But in fact, we haven't understood exactly what life is yet. Sorry, let me just fix this because the pictures are important. Okay, it's back. So, what is life? This is a long, boring list, okay? But basically, that's our understanding of life. We have this list, you know, we look around us and we see all these different living systems. We see bacteria, we see algae, we see insects, we see animals, we see humans, and we look at what they have in common. So, we know that all animals or plants or life can grow. We know that they can reproduce. We know that they can metabolize, they need to eat. Okay, these are all things that we've watched about what life can do. But basically, that's just been collecting a whole lot of evidence. Have we been able to build a living system? The physicist that I showed you the picture of, who won the Nobel Prize in the previous slide, he said that if we really want to say we understand something, we should be able to build it. So we haven't yet been able to build a cell. A cell is such a complicated thing. We've studied it a lot, okay? But so far we haven't been able to understand how to build a cell from basic components. So if you give me some hydrogen, some carbon, some oxygen, all of the nitrogen, all of the different elements that you need to build a cell, we haven't been able to put it together, okay? Nature is still far ahead of us in terms of its complexity. So this is, you don't need to read all of that, but in case you are interested, you could look up this article here, where they managed to introduce synthetic DNA into a living cell. So they didn't create the cell, but they did artificially create the DNA that they introduced into the cell. So basically that's just saying that we are in the early stages of kind of building life from basic components. We are able to introduce certain things into cells, aspects of it synthetically, but so far we haven't been able to build a cell from basic components completely. And as the authors of this paper say, a single cellular system with all of its genes understood has not been possible yet in terms of the biological role of all of these genes. Next slide. So, yeah. Okay, so one of the questions that I found most fascinating at the moment, and that's what I'm going to spend my next few years trying to investigate, what is different from a bunch of molecules and a living organism. So, who can recognize that molecule over there? Maybe, maybe not. Anyway, it's the alcohol molecule, okay? Just because it looks like a horse, I thought it was funny to compare. What is the difference between a bunch of molecules and the bunch of molecules that make up a living thing? That's what we're trying to understand. So, quantum biology might sound like a new and amazing and fantastic field of research, but in fact the ideas have been around for a long time. So all of these people lived maybe 100 years or less than 100 years ago. They were discovering or investigating the very early days of quantum mechanics. So Albert Einstein, I'm sure you can recognize him, he said we can best feel in dealing with living things just how primitive physics is. So for a physicist to describe a living thing is very complicated. Living things are big, they've got many molecules, hard to describe. Okay, Niels Bohr is a title that I've taken from him. So in 1932, Niels Bohr gave a lecture called Light and Life. This was really one of the first ideas that physics may have a contribution to understanding biology. He also said that light is our principal tool of observation in physics. Okay, we know that it's our principal tool of observation in everyday life, but also in the laboratory we use lasers, we use light to understand what's going on in very small systems as well. Erwin Schrödinger, one of the founders of quantum theory, maybe you've heard of Schrödinger's cat. Okay, that's one of the famous stories that people tell to try and explain some aspects of quantum theory. He said, how can we explain the events happening in a living organism using physics and chemistry? This is a major problem of our time, okay? We have physics. Chemistry is well related to physics, but then there's a gap, and then there's biology. So our aim is to try and derive or explain biology in terms of physics and chemistry, to understand what makes the difference between some molecules and some molecules that can't. So for quantum biology, what are the big questions? The big question is, what is life? We would like to understand very precisely what life is. And it's possible that quantum mechanics may shed some light on this question. Okay, the sort of the more everyday questions that we are working towards right now is whether living systems use quantum mechanics. So I'll talk in a bit about how photosynthesis, all photosynthetic organisms, bacteria, but also the plants you see growing outside, use quantum mechanics to survive. And finally, can we use our knowledge of nature on these very small scales of quantum mechanics to build new stuff? So can we build very efficient solar cells? We all know that using green renewable energy technologies is important nowadays. So can our understanding of quantum biology help us to build very efficient, maybe cheap, efficient solar cells that are biologically inspired to copy what plants do so perfectly in our own technologies that we can use as humans on Earth? So it has been shown through these experiments, as I said, using ultra-fast lasers. Basically, these lasers take a picture every femtosecond. So here's another thing, 10 to the minus 15 seconds. So it is a very small amount of time. The new technologies that have emerged since kind of 2007 have enabled us to look at photosynthetic systems, taking photos like every femtosecond. So as you can imagine, this is a very quick process that we're only able to study recently. And as I've said, quantum objects can behave like a wave. So this is exactly what this paper was showing, that the energy transfer in photosynthesis has this wave-like property, which is related to quantum theory. That's why, as quantum physicists, we are now starting to study photosynthesis. So this is a nice picture showing how light, either in the form of the laser in the laboratory or in the form of sunlight outside, enters into the photosynthetic complex. So let's have a look. These are the chlorophyll molecules, or bacteria chlorophyll in bacteria, or chlorophyll in plants. And this is the network of sites through which the energy gets transferred. Okay, and this picture here is just to show that they found evidence of a quantum wave-like nature. They found evidence of quantum coherence in green sulfur bacteria. So this is just some of our work, published at the beginning of my PhD, where we showed, don't worry about the complications, that in a very short time, 1 picosecond, that's 10 to the minus 12 seconds, so as you can see, all of these things happen quickly, that you can get almost 90% probability of transferring the energy through the antenna. This just means it's 90% efficient. That means it's much better than our solar panels and solar cells that we can buy now, because these that you buy to put on your roof are only about 10% efficient. Okay, so that's what I mean when I say nature does it well. We would like to understand how nature does it so well. So what else do we study? I said that was green sulfur bacteria. You can also get purple sulfur bacteria with this kind of purple color. The very early stages of photosynthesis are this energy transfer that I showed in the previous slide through that network. The next thing that happens, also in picoseconds, is electron transfer in this structure called the reaction center. Okay, in the reaction center, electrons get transferred down this chain, and this is a process that also happens very efficiently. So what these graphs are showing here, again on very short scales, so here the process could be completed between 10, 15 and 20 nanoseconds, so this one is slightly longer than the other one, 10 to the minus 9. Okay, what we showed is that in the good case, 17% of the time, quantum mechanics prevents the death of the cell. Okay, so efficiency is very important for life. You want to transfer your energy with 90%, 100% efficiency. You don't want to lose, and you don't want to die. Actually, that's more important, I think. To prevent death is probably more important than being efficient. So in this work, we were looking at electron transfer, and we were showing how quantum mechanics provides protection against events that can lead to the death of the cell. And in fact, that works 17% of the time, which might not sound like a lot, but there are a lot of different mechanisms taking place at the same time. And to reduce death in 17% of the cases is much better than 0. So, I'm nearly at the end now. Maybe you're still wondering why this should be interesting to us. Well, on Earth, we have one major renewable energy source. That's the sun. Why is it renewable? Because more comes through every day. Okay, the sun is shining. The sun has its nuclear reactions going on. It's a constant energy source, which is constantly coming towards us. Okay, if we want to use renewable energy, the sun is an obvious choice. It's not a coincidence that bacteria and plants, these are the oldest organisms on Earth. As I said, like 4 billion years they've been living on Earth. To use sunlight, that's the natural energy source for the planet. So the sun is a renewable energy source. The very early stages of photosynthesis that I told you about, the energy transfer, the electron transfer, these happen with almost an efficiency of 100%. Okay? So if we can understand how this efficiency is achieved, as I said, I'm a theorist, I don't do the experiments. Our graphs that I showed you there were our theoretical explanation of the photosynthetic process. So that's what we're doing. We're trying to understand. Experiments show us that plants are 100% efficient. We try and understand how, and we need quantum mechanics to do that. So basically these kind of artificial leaves or biologically inspired solar cells could lead to a revolution in our power supply. Okay, these are green and renewable energy resources from the sun. So it's important that we do research in this area, even if it's only 10 or 20 years' time that we are able to build these kind of devices. So what else is interesting? The fact that birds may use quantum mechanics to navigate in the Earth's magnetic field. So the Earth's magnetic field is actually relatively weak, okay, as physicists might call it. So they're trying to understand how birds are so sensitive to this fairly weak field. And it seems like quantum mechanics offers a good explanation of how birds do that. So the plants you see growing around use quantum mechanics to grow and to survive. The birds that you see coming from the north or leaving from South Africa to go to the north, in summer or winter, whichever direction they're going, there's a good proposal that they use quantum mechanics to navigate. I don't have time to go into detail there, but you can look online for that. There's another proposal that our sense of smell, which is so accurate. Like you can take one molecule, you can move one electron and take the same molecule, and humans are able to tell the difference. So if you're just moving one electron and you can smell the difference in that, that shows that your sense of smell is quantum efficient. Okay, it can tell the movement of your sense of smell is an amazing thing, which may turn out to be quantum mechanical, or we may need quantum mechanics to understand exactly how it works. DNA DNA mutations is another area that we are doing a lot of research in around the world. So it may be that quantum mechanics can also help us to understand these DNA mutations, which has all sorts of implications for diseases and many other aspects of life. So a more crazy proposal is that our brains use quantum mechanics to think. Okay, this is there's less evidence for this. Maybe this is more like 100 years in the future we will finally begin to understand more about the brain. But there's so many fascinating questions that can be answered by combining quantum mechanics with biology. So, on another point, on Earth we like to study life, but we only have one example of the emergence of it. So as far as we can tell, all life on Earth came from one common ancestor. Okay? That's what evolution is. Started with something else in the complex that we see around us. But the point is that we're all related. Okay? We all have DNA, we all have RNA, the concept of a cell we share. So if we find evidence of life on another planet, this would be an amazing breakthrough. So currently people are hopeful that maybe Jupiter's moon, Europa, could have life living underneath the surface. It's got an icy surface, but underneath there may be liquid water. As far as we know, life needs liquid water. So this is a good indication that we may have a lot of promise to look for life in Europa, underneath the surface. So, or what about on Mars? There's evidence that Mars's climate was much once warmer and much wetter than it is now. If it was warmer and wetter, it may have had liquid water. As far as we know, life needs liquid water, so we could find evidence that life once lived on Mars. If we did find evidence of life on these other planets or moons, this life would be one of two things. Either it would be completely different to life on Earth, or it would be related. Okay, and either way, this is the most fascinating question to know where we come from, who we are, and where we're going. So if it turns out that life exists in our solar system, this has huge implications for life in the rest of the universe, because if we have completely distinct life living on two neighboring planets like Earth and Mars, this really means that life is probably everywhere in the universe, and we just need to travel far enough, either with our instrumentation or personally, to go and look for it. So on that note, I'm currently one of the 100 finalists of the Mars One project to move to Mars. So I hope one day that I can continue doing my research on Mars. But that's a whole other story. I do have a YouTube video on that. If you just Google my name and the Mars One project, you can watch the YouTube video where I explained everything in a simple way about the Mars One project. Or on Twitter, I've got all of my updates. So that's the end. I just want to thank my group. As you can see, that's my boss. That's just a joke photo. Okay, that is Einstein, but that's my real boss, Prof. Francesco Petruccione. This is in the research group in Durban. And probably you guys are not ready to do postgraduate studies yet, but that's something to aim for. Okay, this is the only quantum research group in Africa, and there are lots of opportunities and funding to study there. And as you noticed, maybe especially the ladies in the audience noticed that all the pictures I showed were of men. Okay, but that's changing a lot now, so I hope that next time I give a talk in 20 years' time, I can put some of your faces on my slides to say the brilliant things that you have discovered. So I would like to say thank you to L'Oreal and UNESCO, who are funding a program called For Women in Science, and they're also starting one called For Girls in Science. So I think next year they're going to start doing that, so if you just look on the L'Oreal website or on the UNESCO website, you can find out more about the For Women in Science program. And this was, actually I just arrived back from Paris last for us to go to an awards ceremony, and they've also given me money to do my research on what distinguishes a bunch of molecules from the bunch of molecules that makes up a living organism. So thanks to L'Oreal and UNESCO, who've made my research possible for the next year. And there's a picture of some of us young researchers who won that award. So that's all for now. Please ask questions, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'd like to open the floor for any questions. Yes, please.
You said there might be life on other planets, and you speculated that the RNA and DNA might be either the same or completely different. Have you speculated on how different it could be? What could they RNA and DNA?
No, actually, in the bus at the L'Oreal UNESCO, all of the sightseeing we were doing with the other recipients of the award, I had this conversation with a biologist who was sitting next to me in the bus, and basically I have absolutely no idea. I mean, it's taken us so much work just to understand how information is transferred to the next generation through DNA. So I think we don't even understand how that works completely. I mean, it's a very stable aspects of it that we understand why it works. But to understand how another one could work is mind-blowing. So maybe too much for my mind, but maybe these guys can do it.
Any other questions?
Yes, you say you're on a one-way ticket to Mars.
Yes,
Yeah.
possibly.
And I presume you thought right through this?
Yes. Well, as a child, I had this weird living on another planet. I can't explain it. Maybe someone else has had it.
Well, I think
maybe
we
not.
all have that, but there's a practicability of being able to do it. Now, you're going to go to Mars with no return ticket, correct?
Yep.
May interest you to know, you may already know that NASA think people like you are crazy, and ESA think the same thing as well. It doesn't make a lot of sense. I can't spend all day talking to you and discussing with you, but I'd like, just out of interest, what's the proportion of males and females of this 115? Is it
50-50.
It is. Right. Now, what do we know about dark matter and dark energy? How far have we got down the line?
Very little. Yeah, that's why it's so far.
Yeah. Do you get involved at all?
No, so my research is focused more on quantum theory and only biology, but I think if I were living on Mars, I would like to do research on all sorts of topics. But on the point of the one-way trip, I would just like to point out that humans have always been explorers going on one-way. Life emerged in Africa. Now we live all over the planet. This was essentially a one-way trip because not everybody came back to Africa. My ancestors came back to Africa from Europe, also on a one-way trip. That's why I'm still here. My ancestors had a war in France where they were being persecuted. They had no option. They packed all their stuff. They weren't rich. They were farmers making wine and things like that, like French people do. So they got on the boat. They couldn't afford a return ticket. Some of them died on the way. They arrived in South Africa, in Cape Town. There wasn't much here at that point in terms of infrastructure or knowledge about what they were coming to. They built their lives here as subsistence farmers. And some of them died. I mean, it wasn't easy. So the notion of a one-way trip is not a new concept. Just the length or the distance is new. Okay?
That's what you all say, but they were still on the same planet, okay?
Well, they went to the same continent. It's all relative.
Any other questions?
Based on existing life. Never picked up something that started on its own. Everything that comes about is based on what is already alive. Like we see of some sort. There's no original stuff coming up.
So I think according to genetics, so that's not my field, but the DNA, you can actually trace back that we did have a common ancestor. So there's been no incidence of life on Earth that's completely distinct from all other life. It really does appear as though we are all coming from a single organism that was the original life form on Earth. So the possibility of finding life on another planet opens up the possibility of finding completely different forms of life, or even more interestingly, maybe it's related to us, which shows that our original common ancestor may have come from a different galaxy. Okay, there's so many questions.
So you've got the Big Bang that started the game or something that started life.
Yeah, hopefully we can answer that one day.
Any more questions? I actually have a question for you, and it's more for the learners. For those of them that have never heard of quantum mechanics or quantum physics or quantum biology, what classes or courses would you suggest them to take at this age that they can then help them have a better, stepping stone to go into college or go into postgraduate studies?
Good question, yeah, I should have mentioned that. So this is a bad thing to say probably, but I thought science was quite boring in school. Really. I wanted to drop it. In standard 8, you guys already know. In grade 10, when you have to choose your subjects, I'm not sure if you have to choose or which year you choose it in. But my mom told me, actually, I have my mom to thank for this. She said, don't drop science because that's the only subject that if you drop, you lose opportunities later. She said, even if you don't do science, just keep doing it in school because when you go to university, if you didn't do science and maths at school, You can't do a BSc in university. Okay, if you love your other subjects, I loved arts, I loved history, I loved all of that stuff, but my mom convinced me not to drop science, even though I thought it was a little bit boring. Okay. In university, I started learning more about science and reading more and understanding more what a scientific career is, and then I started loving it. So, unfortunately, some people might think science is boring, but I promise you, don't drop it, just keep it until matric, because you don't lose anything by keeping it. Maybe you have to do a lot of work to pass it, but that's good. Hard work is a good thing. And then you can have all of your options open for you in the future. So keep studying maths and science, just to keep your options open. That is a good piece of advice from my mother.
Any last questions? Well, real quick before we close out, on behalf of the entire Scifest, thank you for presenting this lecture, and we definitely hope that we can have you back in the future. And congratulations again.
Maybe we have a few more years.
Maybe we can get a Skype session in from Mars, who knows? But we definitely want to congratulate you on obtaining your PhD and look forward to following you in the future.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
All of you.
Thank you, guys.